Are you asking my son to confess before you let him speak? Marcus Hale's voice cut across the boardroom as Principal Whitman slid the expulsion packet onto the table like a verdict. Eli stood beside the whiteboard with a black marker trembling in his hand, his oil-smudged spiral notebook sealed inside a clear evidence bag. At the far end, a woman in a gray coat looked from the boy to the timestamp on the paper. Whitman smiled politely. Mr. Hale, the facts are already clear. Marcus put one hand on Eli's shoulder. Let him solve it now. 3 hours earlier, the garage lights at Hale Auto Repair had still been humming over the hood of a rusted pickup, and Marcus had been wiping his hands on the same red shop towel tucked into his back pocket. The air smelled like motor oil, old rubber, and coffee that had been reheated too many times. Eli sat on an upside-down milk crate near the workbench, his school backpack open, his spiral notebook balanced on his knees. The notebook was cheap, bent at the corners, and stained where Marcus's fingers had touched the pages after checking an engine. To Eli, it was not messy. It was proof that numbers could make sense if someone patient enough showed him where to look. Marcus leaned over the page and tapped a pencil against a drawing of 2 gears. Don't rush the answer, he said. A problem is like an engine. If one part feels wrong, you don't blame the whole truck. You slow down and find the part that doesn't fit. Eli nodded, but his eyes kept moving to the clock above the parts shelf. Westbridge High had called at 8:11 that morning. The secretary's voice had been tight and rehearsed. Principal Whitman needed them both in the disciplinary conference room by 11. There had been a serious academic integrity matter. She would not say cheating. She did not have to. Marcus had felt Eli go still beside him before the call even ended. Now the boy's lips were pressed together the way they had been since his mother died. The way he looked when he was trying not to make his fear somebody else's problem. Marcus closed the notebook gently and slid it into Eli's backpack. You tell the truth, he said. You don't dress it up. You don't make it smaller. Just the truth. Eli whispered, They won't believe me. Marcus looked at his son's hands, the same long fingers that could hold a wrench steady and work a fraction problem without showing off. Then we give them something stronger than believing, he said. We give them facts. By the time they reached Westbridge High, the building looked too clean for what it was about to do. Sunlight flashed against the glass doors. The lobby floor shined like nobody in there had ever tracked in dirt from a long workday. Marcus noticed the security camera above the entrance, the polished trophy case, the framed photographs of scholarship winners smiling in blue blazers. Eli's face was not in any of them yet, but his name had been on the STEM finalist list for 3 weeks. That was the first time Marcus had seen his son stand taller in public. It was also the first time certain parents had started looking at him like a mistake in the system. The secretary told them to wait outside the conference room. Through the frosted glass, Marcus could hear chairs sliding, paper shuffling, a woman's low voice saying, We have to protect the school's reputation. When the door opened, Principal Whitman stood there in a navy suit with a calm, practiced expression. Ms. Carla Price sat to his right, hands folded over a stack of test papers. Diane Rusk sat farther back, pearls at her throat, phone face down on the table like she had already finished whatever needed to be arranged. And near the end, quiet as a witness nobody had introduced, sat the woman in the gray coat. Marcus stepped inside with Eli. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Whitman did not offer them water. He did not ask Eli what happened. He only opened the folder and turned the first page toward Marcus. Expulsion recommendation. STEM scholarship revoked, pending final board approval. Marcus read the line once, then again, and something cold settled behind his ribs. Eli stared at the whiteboard, not the paper. Dad, he whispered, so softly only Marcus heard him. I can do a new one. Marcus looked down at the bottom corner of the document, where the printer mark sat in tiny black letters. Printed. 7:42 a.m., nearly half an hour before the school had even called him. Marcus kept his eyes on the tiny print at the bottom of the page. 7:42 a.m. The numbers were so small most people would have missed them, but men who worked on engines learned to respect small things. A loose bolt, a cracked hose, one wrong sound under the hood. Eli had stopped breathing normally beside him. The boy's fingers curled around the edge of his backpack, right where the oil-smudged spiral notebook had been taken from him and sealed inside a clear plastic evidence bag on the table. "This was printed before you called me," Marcus said. Principal Whitman's smile did not move, but something in his eyes tightened. "Mr. Hale, please don't make this adversarial. I'm asking a question, and I'm asking you to let us follow procedure." The fluorescent lights buzzed above them, thin and cold, reflecting off the polished conference table where Marcus could see the dull shape of his own work shirt in the shine. Navy cotton, faded at the collar, one sleeve marked with a dark crescent of grease he had missed that morning. Across from him, Whitman's cufflinks flashed when he folded his hands. Miss Price adjusted the stack of test papers in front of her like she was straightening a wall. Diane Rusk tilted her head with the soft pity of someone who had never had to choose between missing work and defending her child. "Eli's score pattern raised concern," Miss Price said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, and that made it worse. "The jump was unusual. In my professional opinion, it did not match his prior classroom performance." Eli looked down. Marcus felt the movement more than saw it, the small collapse of a 14-year-old trying to shrink inside a room full of adults. He moved his chair half an inch closer to his son. The chair legs scraped the floor, a quiet sound that made everyone glance at him as if even that was too much noise. "He studied," Marcus said. Miss Price pressed her lips together. "No one is saying he didn't attempt to improve. You just said his improvement was the problem." "I said it was unusual." Diane Rusk gave a small sigh, the kind meant to be heard. "We all want to be compassionate," she said, touching the pearls at her throat. "But Westbridge has standards. Some children work honestly for their place in advanced programs. It would be unfair to them if exceptions were made because of difficult circumstances." The words landed softly, but Marcus heard the blade inside them. Difficult circumstances. That was what they called rent paid late, lunch packed from leftovers, a father in steel-toed boots walking into a room full of degrees and polished shoes. He looked at Eli's hands. Clean today because the boy had washed twice before school, but there was still a faint gray line near one fingernail from helping him change a belt on Mrs. Alvarez's minivan. Marcus reached into his back pocket, pulled out the red shop towel, and wiped a spot of water from the table near Eli's sleeve. It was a small thing, something to do with his hands that was not anger. "My son is not an exception," Marcus said. "He is a student. If you have evidence, show it. If you have suspicion, call it suspicion." Whitman leaned back. "Mr. Hale, we understand this is emotional." "No," Marcus's voice stayed low. "Emotional is what happens after you decide whether the truth matters." A silence opened. Not big, not dramatic, just enough for the woman in the gray coat at the far end of the table to stop writing. Dr. Vivian Grant had not introduced herself beyond a quiet nod when Marcus entered. She had watched more than she had spoken, her silver book-shaped pin catching a pale line of light whenever she shifted. Now her pen rested above her green folder, still. Whitman cleared his throat and turned his tablet toward himself. A notification banner flashed across the top before he could swipe it away. Marcus caught only part of it, but it was enough. STEM Scholarship Office, Hale Award status suspended, sent 8:06 a.m. His stomach went cold in a new place. Not the printed packet now. The scholarship too. Suspended before he had walked through the school doors. Eli saw his father's face change. "Dad?" he whispered. Marcus reached for the water bottle on the table and opened it for him, twisting the cap slowly so the plastic crackle would not shake in his hand. "Drink," he said. Eli obeyed, taking one small sip like the room might punish him for needing it. Diane Rusk looked at the bottle, then at Marcus's grease-stained sleeve, and her expression softened into something almost kind. "Mr. Hale, no one wants to hurt your boy, but sometimes parents, under pressure, make choices they later regret." Marcus looked at her. "Say what you mean." "I mean children do not always understand what adults do on their behalf." Eli's head snapped up. "My dad didn't do anything." Ms. Price lifted one hand. "Eli, this is not the time." It is his name on the paper, Marcus said. He can speak one sentence. Whitman's smile thinned. Children under stress often become confused. That is why we prefer to proceed through the adults. Through the adults. Marcus looked at the adults. The principal with a packet printed too early, the teacher who called hard work suspicious, the donor parent who wrapped accusation in concern. He turned back to Whitman. Then proceed through me. I want the scholarship policy, the original test, the alleged notes, and the chain of custody form showing who took what, when, and with whose signature. Miss Price's fingers stopped moving on the stack of papers. Whitman glanced at her before he answered. Just a flick of the eyes, quick as a loose wire sparking in the dark. At the end of the table, Dr. Vivian looked down at the sealed notebook again, then at the blank signature line on the form half-hidden beneath it. Dr. Vivian's eyes stayed on the half-hidden form only a moment before Principal Whitman reached over and slid another sheet on top of it. The movement was smooth, almost practiced, but Marcus saw it. So did Eli. The boy's fingers tightened around the water bottle until the plastic crackled in the quiet room. Miss Price cleared her throat and said the requested documents would take a few minutes to gather. Whitman stood first, as if standing made him in charge of the air. We'll take a brief recess, he said. Mr. Hale, please remain available. Do not discuss the matter with your son in any way that could influence his statement. Marcus looked at Eli, then back at the principal. He's my child, he said. I'm going to help him breathe. No one answered that. The chairs scraped back. Papers were gathered. Tablets were turned face down. Diane Rusk walked past Marcus slowly, close enough for her perfume to cut through the stale coffee smell of the conference room. Sometimes, she said softly, not quite looking at him, the kindest thing a parent can do is admit when they reach too far. Marcus did not give her the anger she seemed to be waiting for. He only reached for Eli's backpack, checked that the zipper was closed, and guided his son toward the hallway. Before they left, Eli looked back at the table where his spiral notebook sat trapped in clear plastic beside the expulsion packet. The old oil stain on the cover looked darker under the fluorescent lights, like something dirty instead of something loved. They think it's bad because it came from the garage, Eli whispered. Marcus stopped beside the glass door. He wanted to say 100 things. He wanted to tell his son that people who never fixed anything often feared hands that carried proof of work. But Eli was 14, and 14-year-olds did not need speeches when their whole body was trying not to shake. Marcus touched the back of his neck, gentle and steady. That notebook taught you, he said. It didn't cheat for you. In the hallway, the school felt too polished and too loud. Lockers clicked. A bell rang somewhere far down the corridor. A group of students slowed when they saw Eli, then quickly looked away, the way kids did when adults had already told them who was safe to stand near. Eli lowered his head. Marcus moved between him and the open hallway without making a show of it. A father could be a wall without raising his voice. Near the main office, the secretary told them they could wait outside if they needed air. Marcus nodded. His phone buzzed in his pocket just as they reached the glass doors. It was a text from Darnell, the young mechanic covering the garage. Mrs. Alvarez came back. Minivans still slipping. Also power company left final notice on door. Marcus stared at the words for 1 second, then locked the screen. The pressure in his chest did not change his face. Eli had enough weight on him. He did not need to carry the lights at the garage too. Outside, the late morning sun hit the parking lot in hard white strips. Heat shimmered above the asphalt. Marcus smelled cut grass from the football field, exhaust from the buses, and the faint metallic tang that always came before an old battery gave up. That sound found him before the sight did. Click, click, click. Not an engine turning. A starter begging for power. Across the lot, beside a silver sedan parked near the visitor spaces, the woman in the gray coat stood with one hand on the open driver's door and the other gripping a phone. Her green folder was tucked under her arm. The silver pin shaped like a little book glinted on her lapel. A few parents in business clothes walked past her, one of them glancing at the car and then at his watch as if inconvenience might be contagious. Marcus slowed. Eli looked up. Dad, we're supposed to stay available. We are, Marcus said. She's 10 parking spaces away. The woman tried the ignition again. Click, click, click. Her shoulders tightened, but she did not call out. Marcus recognized that kind of silence. It was not pride exactly. It was the tired dignity of someone who had learned not to expect help from people in a hurry. He walked over with Eli beside him. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice low so he would not startle her. "Battery terminal sounds loose or corroded. Mind if I take a look?" She turned, and for the first time since the conference room, Marcus saw something unguarded in her face. Not fear, not pity, tension. "You're the father from inside," she said. "Yes, ma'am. You don't have to do that right now." Marcus looked once through the glass doors of Westbridge High, where Principal Whitman's shape moved behind the office window. Then he looked back at the sedan. "Cars don't care if it's a bad day," he said. "They still need the right connection." He set Eli's backpack carefully on the curb, opened the old toolbox he kept in the truck, and took out a wrench and a small wire brush. The battery terminal was crusted white at the edge, the clamp loose enough to wiggle. Marcus worked without drama. Brush, loosen, clean, tighten. His hands moved with the same patience he had used that morning over Eli's gear drawings. Eli crouched near the front tire, watching but not touching until Marcus nodded for him to hand over the red shop towel. "Positive side is loose," Eli said quietly, proud to notice something simple. Marcus gave him the smallest smile. "Good eye." The woman heard it. She looked from the boy to the towel, then to Marcus's hands as he wiped corrosion from the clamp. "You teach him that?" she asked. "I teach him what I can," Marcus said. "He teaches me where I'm too tired to explain right." The engine caught on the next turn. A small, ordinary sound. But the woman closed her eyes for half a second as if the car starting had given her back more than transportation. She reached into her purse. Marcus lifted one hand. "No charge." "Mr. Hale." It was a loose terminal. He tore a small invoice slip from the pad in his toolbox anyway, because he believed work should be named even when it was given freely. In block letters, he wrote, "No charge, battery terminal tightened, M. Hale Garage." He handed it to her with the same respect he would have given a paying customer. She took the paper slowly. Her thumb rested on the words "no charge." Behind them, inside the school office, Whitman appeared at the glass and stopped when he saw Marcus beside the sedan. His mouth tightened, as if kindness outside his building was another delay he had not approved. The woman folded the invoice once and slipped it into her green folder, right beside the notes she had taken in the conference room. Then her eyes shifted to Eli's backpack on the curb, to the place where the spiral notebook should have been, and she asked, very softly, "Is that how he learned the math they're calling impossible?" The woman's question followed Marcus back through the glass doors like a small light he was not ready to trust. "Is that how he learned the math they're calling impossible?" He did not answer right away. He only picked up Eli's backpack from the curb, checked the zipper again, and guided his son inside before Principal Whitman could step fully into the lobby and turn the parking lot into another accusation. Whitman's eyes moved from Marcus's toolbox to Dr. Vivian's gray coat, then down to the green folder tucked under her arm. "Dr. Grant," he said, "too quickly now. We were just about to resume." Dr. Vivian did not correct his tone. She did not thank Marcus in front of anyone. She simply held the folded no-charge invoice between two fingers for one quiet second, then slipped it deeper into her folder as if it had become a document rather than a kindness. Marcus noticed, but he did not let himself build hope from it. Hope in rooms like this could make a man careless. Back inside the conference room, the air felt colder than before. The plastic evidence bag still sat on the table, Eli's oil-smudged spiral notebook trapped inside it, the bent wire rings catching the fluorescent light. Someone had moved the expulsion packet slightly closer to Marcus's chair, as if the paper itself was being asked to intimidate him. Miss Price sat straighter when they entered. Diane Rusk had her phone in her lap now, screened down against her skirt. Mr. Reed, the substitute teacher whose name Marcus had seen on the testing schedule, stood just outside the glass wall of the room, holding a stack of copies against his chest. He looked young enough to still believe policies meant what they said, and scared enough to know they often did not. "Before we continue," Whitman said, "I want the record to show that Mr. Hale engaged privately with a board representative during recess." Marcus looked at him. Eli looked up sharply. Dr. Vivian remained still. "He fixed my car," she said. Whitman's smile tightened. "Of course, I'm not suggesting improper intent. We simply have to protect the integrity of the proceeding." "Then protect it," Marcus said. His voice stayed low. "Put it in the record that I fixed a loose battery terminal in the visitor lot and charged nothing." The word nothing sat there longer than it should have. Diane Rusk gave a soft little laugh through her nose, almost kind. "That is very generous, Mr. Hale. But generosity does not answer the academic concern." "No," Marcus said. "Evidence does." Dr. Vivian looked at him then, not with trust, not yet, but with attention sharpened by caution. "Principal Whitman," she said, "please provide the chain of custody form for the alleged unauthorized material." Miss Price's hand moved before Whitman's did. Just a slight reach toward the folder, then a stop when she realized everyone could see it. Whitman opened the packet and removed a form with the school seal at the top. The paper was smooth and official, divided into boxes. Student name, item description, time collected, collected by, witnessed by, student notified. Marcus did not touch it at first. He bent closer, like he was listening to an engine tick after shutdown. Eli leaned toward him, but Marcus rested 2 fingers on the table, a quiet signal to stay still. "May I?" Marcus asked. Whitman hesitated. Dr. Vivian said, "Let him review the form." Marcus pulled the paper into the light. The box for item description said spiral notebook containing suspicious formulas. The time collected was written as 9:48 a.m. The collected by line had Ms. Price's signature, sharp and slanted hard to the right. The witnessed by line was empty, not smudged, not forgotten halfway. Empty, a clean white box where a name should have been. Marcus looked toward the glass. Mr. Reed lowered his eyes. "Who witnessed the notebook being taken from my son?" Marcus asked. "Mr. Hale," Whitman began. "The form is an administrative summary. Who witnessed it?" The classroom was under staff supervision. "That wasn't my question." The fluorescent buzz seemed louder. A copy machine clicked somewhere beyond the wall. Ms. Price folded her hands. "I observed suspicious material connected to Eli's test. The notebook was relevant." "Was it on his desk?" Marcus asked. "It was in his possession." Eli's voice came out small but clear. "It was in the bin." Every adult turned toward him. Eli swallowed, fingers pressing into his backpack strap. He did not look brave. He looked like a child forcing the truth through fear. "Mr. Reed told us to put our bags and notebooks in the side bin before the test. I put it there. I didn't have it at my desk." Ms. Price leaned forward. "Eli, sometimes students under pressure remember events in a way that protects them." Marcus turned his head slowly. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make his memory sound like a symptom." Dr. Vivian's pen stopped above the green folder. Whitman cleared his throat. "The key point is that the notebook contained formulas related to the exam." Marcus looked at the evidence bag. "Open it." Ms. Price's eyes flashed. "That material is evidence. Then let the evidence breathe." Dr. Vivian considered him for a beat, then nodded once. "Open the bag. Carefully." Whitman did not like it, but he broke the seal and slid the notebook out with 2 fingers, as though grease could accuse him back. The cover was soft from use. One corner had been repaired with a strip of blue painter's tape. Across the front, in Eli's neat handwriting, were the words Garage Math, Week 1 to 6. Marcus did not smile. Smiling would have felt like asking the room to like his poverty. He only turned the first page. There were drawings of pistons, pulley ratios, fractions, and little notes in pencil. Chevy belt slip, Mrs. Alvarez van. Dad says check the small part first. Several pages had dates from weeks before the test. One had a coffee ring. Another had a thumbprint darkened with oil. Eli looked at the pages like someone had opened his bedroom in public. Marcus saw the shame and gently moved the notebook closer to himself, not hiding it, just shielding the boy from the way people stared. "These are not answer keys," Marcus said. "They're lessons." Ms. Price said, "They are structured very similarly to the exam concepts." "Math concepts show up in math exams," Marcus said. "That isn't cheating. The pattern of preparation is what concerns us." Dr. Vivian's eyes lifted. "Preparation?" Ms. Price blinked once. Whitman stepped in too quickly. "She means unauthorized preparation." Marcus put one finger on a dated page. "Unauthorized by who?" "His father." The room went still again, not silent enough for truth, but silent enough for discomfort. Then Marcus noticed something else. On the chain of custody form, the item description called the notebook suspicious formulas. But on the expulsion packet printed at 7:42, before the form's collection time of 9:48, the same phrase appeared word for word. Suspicious formulas. Marcus set the two papers side by side, sliding them into the same strip of fluorescent light. Dr. Vivian leaned forward before anyone else did. Whitman reached for the packet, but stopped when Marcus placed one open palm flat beside it. "I'm not moving it," Marcus said. "I'm just asking why the expulsion paper described the evidence 2 hours before the form says it was collected." Marcus's palm stayed flat beside the two papers, not covering them, not claiming them, just refusing to let the room look away. On the left, the expulsion packet printed at 7:42 a.m. called Eli's Notebook Suspicious Formulas. On the right, the chain of custody form claimed that same notebook had not been collected until 9:48. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the air conditioner seemed louder, pushing cold air across the polished table and lifting the corner of the plastic evidence bag like it was trying to breathe. Principal Whitman's fingers hovered near the packet. "That language is standard," he said. "Schools use consistent terminology in disciplinary matters." "Before the evidence exists?" Marcus asked. Whitman's face did not change, but his jaw tightened. Miss Price slid her chair back half an inch, the legs whispering against the carpet. "Mr. Hale, you are implying something very serious." "No," Marcus said. "I'm pointing to 2 times printed by your machines." Diane Rusk folded her hands in her lap, her phone half hidden beneath one palm. "This is exactly why these matters should remain internal," she said, soft as velvet. "People can misunderstand documents when they are upset." Marcus looked at her, then at Eli, who was sitting very still, trying to follow the adult words without drowning in them. The boy's eyes kept returning to the open notebook, to the dated pages and the oil stains that had become ugly under school lights. Marcus reached over and turned the notebook slightly so Eli could see the drawing on the page instead of the evidence label on the bag. It was a simple sketch of 2 gears from the garage, one large, one small, with arrows showing direction. "He understands that page," Marcus said. "That's not upset. That's work." Dr. Vivian Grant had not moved for several seconds. Her silver book pin caught the light when she finally looked up. "Principal Whitman," she said, "I would like the original test, the answer key, and a clean, unrelated problem generated now by someone other than Ms. Price." Whitman blinked. "Dr. Grant, with respect, that is not our usual process. Neither is a document describing evidence before the documented collection time." The sentence did not rise, but it landed hard. Mr. Reed was still outside the glass wall, his copies pressed against his chest. Dr. Vivian turned toward him. "Mr. Reed, you were in the testing room?" He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. Please step inside." He opened the door carefully, as if the handle itself might accuse him. He looked younger up close, his tie slightly crooked, his face pale under the fluorescent light. Ms. Price did not look at him. That was the first thing Marcus noticed. Teachers usually looked at each other when procedure was discussed. Ms. Price looked at the table. "Write a new problem," Dr. Vivian said. "Something grade appropriate, not from the exam, not from a review sheet, and simple enough that we can follow the reasoning." Reed hesitated. Now. Whitman lifted a hand. "This risks confusing the issue. A child under pressure may perform in unpredictable ways."
Elias' shoulders tightened.
Marcus heard the breath catch before anyone else did. He leaned toward his son, close enough that only Eli could hear. "You don't have to be perfect," he said. "You only have to be honest with the work." Reed took a marker from the tray beneath the whiteboard. The cap clicked off with a small snap that made Eli flinch. Reed wrote slowly, his handwriting neat but nervous. "A machine wheel turns 3 times for every 2 turns of a smaller wheel. If the larger wheel turns 18 times, how many times does the smaller wheel turn?" It was not a hard problem. That almost made the room crueler. Miss Price's mouth settled into something close to relief, as if she expected panic to do what accusation had not. Dr. Vivian turned to Eli. "Would you be willing to explain how you would solve it?" Eli looked at the board, then at the adults, then down at his hands. "Do I have to stand?" "Only if you choose to," Dr. Vivian said. Marcus appreciated that more than he showed. A choice, even a small one, could give a frightened child back his own spine.
Eli stood.
The marker looked too thick in his fingers. He walked to the board in his sneakers, and the room seemed to grow around him. All table edges, adult eyes, glass walls, silent judgment. Marcus stayed seated at first, because he did not want anyone to say he was guiding the answer. But when Eli glanced back, Marcus lifted 2 fingers quietly. "Breathe in. Breathe out." Eli did. Then he touched the marker to the board. The first line came out crooked. "It's like a ratio," he said, voice thin. Miss Price shifted. "Speak up, Eli." Marcus's eyes moved to her. "He's speaking." Eli swallowed and tried again. "The big wheel turns 3 when the small one turns 2. So if the big wheel turns 18, that's 6 groups of 3. He wrote 18 divided by 3 equals 6. Then the small wheel has 6 groups of 2. He wrote 6 times 2 equals 12. So the small wheel turns 12 times. He stepped back like the board might reject him. The room did not move. Reed looked at the answer, then at Eli, and something like guilt passed across his face so quickly it could have been mistaken for blinking. Dr. Vivian leaned forward. "Why did you think of it that way?" Eli's fingers tightened around the marker. "Because if Dad is checking a belt or a pulley, he doesn't start by saying the whole engine is broken. He finds the repeating part. Then he counts how many times that part happens." Marcus looked down at the table. He would not let pride become a performance. He would not turn his son's fear into a trophy. But his throat tightened anyway. Diane Rusk's phone lit beneath her hand. She glanced down, typed with one thumb, and turned it face down again. Dr. Vivian saw it. She did not mention it. Instead, she closed her pen, slowly, deliberately, and placed it across the green folder. "That answer is correct," she said. "And the method is consistent with the notebook." Ms. Price's face stayed composed, but the color had changed under her makeup. "A prepared student can reproduce a method," she said, "especially if he has been coached in this exact style." The sentence left her mouth too fast. Reed looked at her. Marcus looked at Reed looking at her. Dr. Vivian's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "This problem was written 30 seconds ago," she said. "What exact style are you referring to?" Ms. Price inhaled. "I mean the mechanical analogy. The father has clearly trained him to present himself that way. Training a child to explain his thinking is not misconduct," Dr. Vivian said. Whitman stepped in, smooth and controlled. "No one is saying it is. But this exercise does not erase the original concern. To avoid further confusion, I recommend we pause the family portion here and allow administration to complete its review privately." Marcus turned to him. "Privately is how that packet got printed before I was called." The room went quiet again, but this time the quiet was different. It was no longer built only from judgment. There was doubt in it now, thin but alive. Eli returned to his chair, and Marcus uncapped the water bottle again, handing it to him without taking his eyes off the table. Eli took a sip and whispered, "Did I do okay?" Marcus answered just as quietly, "You told the truth in numbers." Dr. Vivian reached into her folder and touched the folded no-charge invoice, not pulling it out, only making sure it was still there. Then she looked toward the glass door where the hallway camera blinked red above the testing wing entrance. "Before anyone reviews anything privately," she said, "I want the hallway footage preserved, the printer log from the math office pulled, and every email concerning the Hale matter held from deletion." Whitman's smile disappeared for less than a second, but Marcus saw it, and so did Dr. Vivian, because she added, "Especially anything sent before the donor meeting." The words donor meeting changed the weight of the room. They did not sound like school anymore. They sounded like money, reputation, and doors that opened for some children while closing quietly on others. Whitman recovered first. "Dr. Grant, I understand your concern, but we have internal technology staff for these things. There is no need to escalate a student discipline matter into an institutional review." Dr. Vivian did not raise her voice. She only turned one page in her green folder and wrote something in the margin with a pen that made no sound. "Preserving records is not escalation," she said. "It is protection." Marcus watched her face, careful not to mistake calm for rescue. He had seen enough men in clean offices nod politely before doing nothing. But something had shifted after Eli solved that 5-minute problem. The room no longer looked at his son like a boy caught with dirty hands. They looked at him like a question that might lead somewhere dangerous. Eli sat beside Marcus with the water bottle between both palms, his breathing slower now, though his shoulders still sat too high. Marcus reached over and loosened the strap of Eli's backpack where it dug into his arm. It was a small father thing. No speech, just relief given in inches. A technician from the front office arrived with a laptop cart, pushed by the secretary whose eyes stayed on the floor. The cart wheels squeaked once, then stopped beside the conference table. On the screen, the hallway outside the testing wing appeared in grainy color. Lockers, a trophy case, a red digital clock above the door. The camera angle caught the classroom entrance and the plastic bin where students had been told to place bags and notebooks before the exam. Ms. Price folded her arms. "Hallway footage cannot show what happened inside the classroom." "No," Marcus said, "but it can show whether that notebook went in." No one answered him. The secretary clicked the mouse, and the footage jumped to 9:31 a.m. Students came in one at a time, some laughing, some half awake. One boy spinning a pencil between his fingers. Then Eli appeared. He looked smaller on camera, backpack hanging heavy from one shoulder, hair still neat from where Marcus had smoothed it before school. Mr. Reed stood by the door, pointing to the side bin. Eli stopped, took out the spiral notebook, looked at it for a second like he hated letting it go, then placed it in the bin with his backpack. He walked into the classroom with only a pencil and calculator. In the conference room, the silence became physical. Marcus felt it against his skin. He did not smile. He did not turn toward Ms. Price with satisfaction. Eli did, just a little, the instinct of a child wanting the adults to finally see him. Marcus laid one hand flat on the table, not on Eli, not holding him back, only reminding him not to let relief run faster than truth. "Keep watching," Dr. Vivian said. The secretary moved the footage forward. At 9:48, Ms. Price entered the hallway from inside the classroom with Eli behind her. Her hand was on the spiral notebook, which she had taken from the bin, not the desk. Eli's face on the video was confused, frightened, trying to speak. Ms. Price pointed toward the office. The image had no sound, but the boy's body said enough. Mr. Reed appeared in the doorway behind them. He looked at the bin, then at Ms. Price, but he did not follow. He stayed there with one hand on the doorframe, frozen. Marcus looked through the glass wall at the real Mr. Reed, standing just outside the room. Reed's face had gone the color of paper left too long in the sun. "Mr. Reed," Dr. Vivian said, without turning away from the screen, "did you see Eli Hale use that notebook during the test?" Reed stepped in slowly. The copies in his hands trembled. Whitman's voice sharpened, though the words stayed polite. "Nolan, be careful. Answer only what you directly observed." Reed swallowed. "I did not see him use it." Ms. Price looked at him then. Finally, "You were monitoring 28 students," she said. "You could have missed something." "I could have," Reed said, barely above a whisper. "But I did not see it." Marcus felt anger rise, clean and hot, but he kept it behind his teeth. Reed was not the center of the wound. He was one of the people who had stood near it and looked away. Marcus could have crushed him with one sentence. Instead, he chose the harder thing. Did someone ask you to sign that form after? Reed's eyes closed for half a second. Whitman leaned forward. This is becoming inappropriate. Reed opened his eyes. Yes. Eli's head turned fast. Marcus stayed still. Diane Rusk's phone buzzed under her palm. A tiny vibration against the table that sounded too loud now. Dr. Vivian looked at the phone, then back to Reed. Who asked you? Reed glanced at Ms. Price first, then Whitman. Ms. Price said it was just cleanup. Principal Whitman said the board needed clean paperwork before the donor meeting. Whitman's face changed only around the mouth. That is not an accurate characterization. Dr. Vivian lifted her hand, and for the first time the room obeyed her without knowing why. Printer log, she said to the secretary. The secretary opened another file. Lines of text filled the screen. Math office printer. 7:19 a.m. STEM final answer key. 7:42 a.m. Hale expulsion packet draft. 8:06 a.m. scholarship office notification. Marcus read each line as if each timestamp were a bolt pulled from an engine piece by piece. The answer key had been printed before the school day had settled. The expulsion packet had been drafted before they claimed to collect the evidence. The scholarship warning had gone out before Marcus had been invited to defend his son. It was not one crooked screw. It was a system tightened around the wrong child. Dr. Vivian took the folded no-charge invoice from her green folder and set it beside the printer log, not to explain it, not to use kindness as proof, but to mark the difference between who Marcus had been when no one was watching and who the school had decided he was on paper. For the record, she said, my name is Dr. Vivian Grant. I am a member of this district board's Academic Accountability Committee. From this moment forward, no record connected to the Hale matter is to be deleted, amended, or removed from the premises. Diane Rusk sat up. Her soft concern slipped for the first time. Dr. Grant, surely we don't need to turn this into a spectacle. Children's reputations are involved. Marcus looked at her, then at Eli. That mattered when it was my child too. Diane's jaw tightened. The secretary scrolled lower on the printer log, and another file name appeared beneath the answer key, printed only minutes later from the same office printer. Rusk_practice PDF. No one said it aloud at first. They did not have to. Ms. Price reached for her papers, Whitman looked toward the hallway camera, and Dr. Vivian slowly closed the laptop halfway, as if the truth had grown. Too large for that small room. We are moving this to the boardroom, she said. On camera. On record. With every document in view. The boardroom at Westbridge High was larger than the conference room, but it felt less forgiving. The ceiling lights were brighter, the table was longer, and the camera mounted high in the back corner blinked red as if the room itself had opened one eye. A row of folding chairs had been pulled against the wall for staff, 2 board members, the secretary, Mr. Reed, and a few parents who had been called in because their children's records might be affected. Nobody spoke loudly. That made every small sound sharper. The soft click of Dr. Vivian's heels, the drag of a chair leg, the whisper of paper being placed on polished wood. Marcus walked in beside Eli, not ahead of him like a man trying to lead a parade, not behind him like a man ashamed. Beside him, his navy work shirt still carried the dark grease mark on one sleeve. His red shop towel hung from his back pocket. Eli's face was pale, but he kept walking, one hand gripping the strap of his backpack. On the front table, Dr. Vivian had arranged the evidence in a straight line where everyone could see it. First, the expulsion recommendation with the 7:42 a.m. printer mark. Next, the clear evidence bag that had held Eli's spiral notebook. Then the chain of custody form with the clean, empty witness signature box. Beside it lay a printed still from the hallway camera showing Eli placing the notebook into the side bin before the test. Then came the printer log, the scholarship suspension email, and the internal message that said, handle the Hale matter before the donor meeting. At the end of the row sat one unopened envelope from the district testing bank, sealed with blue tape and signed across the flap by Dr. Vivian and the secretary. That envelope seemed to pull Eli's eyes more than anything else. Principal Whitman stood near the screen at the front, hands folded, his face composed again. Public rooms gave him strength. He knew how to speak where people could hear him. Before this proceeds any further, he said, I want to remind everyone that Westbridge has always taken academic integrity seriously. What may appear to be irregular paperwork can often be explained by fast-moving administrative responsibility. We had a scholarship deadline. We had donor meetings. We had a student whose materials raised reasonable concern. No one here intended harm. A few people shifted in their seats. It was the first retention spike in the room, the first moment where his explanation almost gave frightened people permission to believe the easier story. Fast-moving responsibility. Reasonable concern. No intended harm. The words sounded clean enough to cover stains. Diane Rusk sat 2 chairs from the front, her pearls bright against a cream blouse, her expression carefully wounded. And I hope, she added softly, we remember there are other children involved. My child should not be dragged through embarrassment because one family is upset. Marcus felt Eli stiffen. He looked at Diane, then at the board members, then at the closed envelope. I agree, he said. The room did not expect that. Diane blinked. Marcus rested one hand on the back of Eli's chair. Not possessive, only steady. No child in this school should be dragged through embarrassment because adults are afraid of what the facts say. Not mine. Not yours. Dr. Vivian looked down for a moment, and when she looked back up, there was something firmer in her face. Whitman tried to reclaim the air. Exactly. That is why we should avoid turning a confidential student matter into a public spectacle. This became public, Marcus said. When my son's scholarship was suspended before he was allowed to answer, he did not raise his voice. That was what made people listen. Dr. Vivian lifted the first paper. For the record, this expulsion recommendation was printed at 7:42 a.m. She placed it back down. The school's own chain of custody form states the notebook was collected at 9:48 a.m. Whitman stepped closer to the table. Drafts can contain preliminary language. Dr. Vivian nodded once, as if she had expected that. Then we will treat it as your explanation, not your proof. She lifted the camera still. This image shows Eli placing the notebook in the collection bin before entering the testing room. Mr. Reed has stated he did not see Eli use it during the test. Mr. Reed's throat moved. He looked at the floor, then at Eli. That is correct, he said. His voice shook, but it held. Ms. Price sat beside Whitman, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. The notebook still demonstrates targeted preparation, she said. It is filled with formulas related to the test concepts. Marcus looked at the notebook, then at Eli. The boy's eyes were wet now, but he was not crying. Can I say one thing? Eli asked. Every adult turned. Marcus did not answer for him. Dr. Vivian did. Yes, Eli. One thing. Eli pointed not at Miss Price, not at Whitman, but at the notebook. Those pages have the cars' names because Dad makes me write down what we fixed. If it was a belt problem, we did ratios. If it was a battery, we did circuits. I didn't know that was wrong. The sentence landed heavier than any accusation. It was a child explaining that learning had been mistaken for cheating because it smelled like a garage instead of a tutoring center. Whitman opened his mouth, but Dr. Vivian raised one finger. Thank you, Eli. Then she turned to the printer log. The second retention spike came quietly. She slid one page forward, not the expulsion packet, not the chain form, but the line marked Rusk_practice_set_final.pdf. Mrs. Rusk, she said. This file was printed from the math office shortly after the answer key. Can you explain why a document bearing your family name was printed from school equipment on the same morning? Diane's face changed so quickly that even the camera seemed to catch it. I have no idea what that file is, she said. My family supports this school. Our name appears on many things. It was a reasonable answer on the surface, but Marcus noticed Ms. Price look down at her own papers the instant Diane spoke. Dr. Vivian noticed too. Whitman moved between Diane and the table, not obviously, but enough to block part of the camera's view of the documents. Marcus looked up at the red blinking light in the corner. "Principal Whitman," he said, "you're standing in front of the camera." Whitman stepped aside. The room went still. It was not an accusation. It was just a fact placed where everyone could see it. Dr. Vivian took the sealed blue-taped envelope from the end of the table and held it in both hands. "We are not here to shame children," she said. "We are here to test whether the accusation against Eli Hale can survive clean evidence." Eli reached under the table and found Marcus's hand for 1 second. Marcus squeezed once, then let go so his son could stand on his own. Dr. Vivian broke the first edge of the blue tape, and every eye in the room moved to the unopened test inside. Dr. Vivian broke the blue tape, opened the sealed envelope, and slid the clean test onto the table where every camera could see it. The paper made a soft rasp against the polished wood, and somehow that small sound carried farther than Whitman's speeches, farther than Diane Rusk's careful concern, farther than every word that had been used to make Eli Hale look guilty. "This problem set came from the district testing bank," Dr. Vivian said. "No one in this room has seen it before now." Eli stood beside the whiteboard with the marker in his hand. His face was pale. The marker cap clicked once between his fingers. Marcus stood behind him, close enough for Eli to feel him there, far enough that no one could say he was helping. The room waited. Eli looked at the first problem, then the second, then the third. For a terrible moment he did not move. Miss Price's shoulders lowered almost imperceptibly, as if she could already see him freezing. Diane Rusk looked down at her hands. Whitman's expression softened into the kind of pity that prepared itself to become policy. Marcus saw all of it. He did not touch his son. He only breathed slowly, the same way he had taught Eli beside stubborn engines when frustration made the bolts blur. Eli drew one breath in, let it out, and wrote the first line. The marker squeaked across the board. It was not elegant. The first number leaned too far to the right. He paused, wiped a small section with the side of his hand, and started again. "It's a ratio," he said, his voice thin but steady enough to stand on. "If the output changes every time the input repeats, I have to find the repeat first." No. One interrupted. The air conditioner hummed above them. A phone buzzed once in someone's pocket and was silenced quickly. Eli drew 2 circles, one larger, one smaller, then arrows between them. "Like pulleys," he said. "Or gears. Not because it's a car problem. Because the relationship repeats." Marcus looked down, not because he was ashamed, but because pride felt too loud for this room. Eli worked through the first problem slowly, then the second. He checked a step, frowned, went back, corrected a sign, and kept going. That correction mattered. It showed he was not reciting. He was thinking. Mr. Reed leaned forward before he realized he had moved. Dr. Vivian's hands were folded on the table, perfectly still. When Eli reached the final answer, he boxed it with one uneven rectangle and stepped back. Dr. Vivian opened the district answer sheet, still sealed in the inner flap, and placed it beside the camera. She read the answer, looked at the board, and said, "Correct." The room did not applaud. It went quiet in a way that felt heavier than sound. Eli's hand dropped to his side. The marker had left a black smudge along his thumb. Marcus took the red shop towel from his back pocket and wiped the ink from Eli's hand with the same care he used when cleaning grease out of a cut. Eli whispered, "Did I do it?" Marcus's voice nearly broke, but it did not. "You showed them." Dr. Vivian was not finished. She lifted the oil-smudged spiral notebook and opened it to the dated pages from weeks before the exam. "The method Eli just used appears here," she said. "Not the answer. Not this test. The method." She turned the notebook so the camera could see the old pencil marks. Pulley ratios, engine sketches, fractions written beside notes about Mrs. Alvarez's van and a Chevy belt slip. Then she placed beside it a garage invoice from Marcus's records, the one Dr. Vivian had requested after seeing the page reference. The date matched one of Eli's lessons. The vehicle matched the note. The work description matched the analogy. The notebook was not a cheat sheet. It was a father teaching his son in the only classroom he could afford to keep warm. Miss Price opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dr. Vivian slid the printer log forward. At 7:19 a.m., the STEM final answer key was printed from the math office. At 7:42 a.m., the Hale expulsion packet was drafted. At 8:06 a.m., the scholarship office received a suspension notification. At 9:48 a.m., according to this form, the notebook was supposedly collected. She set the chain of custody form on top, the blank witness line exposed. Mr. Reed did not sign because he did not witness Eli using the notebook. The hallway footage confirms the notebook was in the side bin before testing began. Whitman's hand moved toward his pen, missed it, and the pen rolled once across the table before stopping against the expulsion packet. No one picked it up. Diane Rusk's face had gone tight and white around the mouth. Dr. Vivian placed the final page on the table. Rusk_practice_set_final.pdf. This file was printed shortly after the answer key, she said. Its structure is substantially closer to the answer key than anything found in Eli Hale's notebook. Diane swallowed. My daughter did not do anything wrong. Marcus turned toward her before anyone else could weaponize the moment. Then leave your daughter out of it, he said quietly. This is about what adults did. That sentence changed the room more than anger would have. Diane looked at him, and for the first time there was no polished pity left in her face. Only fear. Dr. Vivian nodded once, as if Marcus had confirmed something she had been measuring all day. Correct, she said. No student will be publicly accused from this table without a full review. But the adults responsible for these documents will answer for them. Whitman tried to speak. Dr. Grant, I think we need to be careful about conclusions. We are being careful, she said. That is why this is now on record. She turned to the secretary. The expulsion recommendation is suspended immediately. The scholarship suspension is frozen pending correction. The Hale disciplinary record is to be locked from further edits. All files connected to this exam, including donor communications, practice materials, printer access, and prior cheating allegations handled under this process are to be preserved for independent review. Miss Price stared at the table. Whitman looked toward the camera and then away. The red light kept blinking. It did not blink faster. It did not accuse. It simply watched. Then Mr. Reed stood. His chair scraped the floor, and everyone heard it. His hands were shaking, but this time he did not sit back down. Eli wasn't the first, he said. The words landed like a second door opening behind the first. Eli turned to Marcus, confused and relieved and wounded all at once. Marcus placed a hand between his son's shoulders. He had wanted his boy's name cleared. He had not known that clearing it would uncover other children buried under the same kind of paper. Dr. Vivian looked at Marcus then, not as a mechanic, not as a poor father, not as a man to be pitied, but as the one person in the room who had every right to demand revenge and had chosen evidence instead. Justice had started. The lie had cracked. But as the whole boardroom sat frozen around the papers they could no longer explain, Marcus looked at Eli's smudged hand and had to decide what kind of man he would be now that the room finally believed him. The first people to leave the boardroom did not make a sound. Chairs were pushed back carefully, folders were gathered without the usual snap of authority, and the red camera light kept blinking above them as if it was still holding the room accountable. Principal Whitman remained standing near the screen, one hand resting on the table, his pen still lying against the expulsion packet where it had rolled and stopped. Ms. Price sat with her eyes lowered, the neat stack of tests in front of her suddenly looking less like evidence and more like paper that had been made to carry someone else's fear. Diane Rusk did not look at Eli. She did not look at Marcus either. For the first time all day, her polished concern had nowhere to stand. Dr. Vivian did not turn the moment into punishment theater. She did not ask anyone to clap. She did not let the adults feed on shame the way they had almost fed on Eli's. She simply gave instructions, one by one, in a voice calm enough to be written down. The expulsion recommendation was voided pending formal correction. The scholarship suspension was reversed and marked as improperly initiated. Eli Hale's disciplinary record was locked, then cleared from active review. Every file connected to the exam, the answer key, the practice set, the donor communication, and the last 3 years of similar cheating allegations would be preserved for independent investigation. Whitman tried once more to speak. Dr. Grant, I think we should be careful not to damage the public trust in this institution. She looked at him for a long second. Public trust is not damaged by the truth, Principal Whitman. It is damaged when adults make a child carry what they are afraid to admit. After that, he said nothing. Mr. Reed stood near the wall, looking like a man who had stepped out of a burning house with smoke still in his clothes. Marcus could have pointed at him. He could have asked why fear had mattered more than Eli's name. Instead, he looked at the young teacher and said, "Tell it right this time." Reed's eyes filled, but he nodded. Dr. Vivian heard it and told the secretary that Mr. Reed would be protected as a witness, not praised as a hero, not crushed as the only guilty person, but required to help open every record that had been sealed too quickly. That mattered to Marcus. Justice that needed a scapegoat could become another lie wearing cleaner clothes. Eli sat beside him with the red shop towel wrapped loosely around one hand, the black marker smudge finally gone from his thumb. He looked smaller now that the fight had stopped. Not weaker, just 14 again. Marcus reached over and pushed the water bottle closer. Eli took it without being told. Across the table, Dr. Vivian slid the oil-smudged spiral notebook toward him. It was no longer inside the evidence bag. The plastic sleeve lay empty beside it, wrinkled and useless. Eli touched the cover with 2 fingers like he was making sure it still belonged to him. The blue painter's tape on the corner was peeling. The oil stain that had looked dirty under accusation now looked like what it had always been. Proof of evenings in a garage, of a father bending over a workbench after a 12-hour day, of a child learning that numbers were not owned by polished rooms. "I'm sorry," Dr. Vivian said to Eli, not to Marcus first, not to the board. "Adults made you prove something that should have been investigated before you were accused." Eli looked at Marcus before answering, and Marcus gave the smallest nod. "Thank you," Eli said. That was all. It was enough. The written apology came 2 days later on Westbridge letterhead, but Marcus made them read it in the same boardroom before it was placed in Eli's file. Not because he wanted a performance, because lies had entered the record publicly, and truth deserved a chair at the same table. Whitman was placed on administrative leave during the investigation. Ms. Price was referred to the State Educator Ethics Board. Diane Rusk was removed from any scholarship committee or donor advisory role connected to student placement. Her child was not named in the public report. Marcus insisted on that. When a board member asked why, Marcus said, "Because children should not pay for adults trying to win." Dr. Vivian looked at him then with something deeper than gratitude. Respect did not arrive loudly. Settled. A week later, she came to Hale Auto Repair without a dead battery this time. The garage door was half open, evening light lying across the cracked concrete floor. The smell of oil, rubber, and sawdust filled the air. Eli was at the workbench, turning a small pulley between his fingers while Marcus tightened a belt on Mrs. Alvarez's minivan. Dr. Vivian stood near the entrance for a moment, watching without interrupting. Then she placed a folder on the metal desk beside the old coffee maker. It was not a check. It was a proposal. Garage STEM Saturdays, a district-supported weekend program for students who learned better with tools in their hands than worksheets under fluorescent lights. Marcus read it slowly. "I'm not a teacher," he said. Dr. Vivian smiled gently.
No.
"You are something many teachers are supposed to become. You see ability before status." He looked away first. Compliments sat awkwardly on him. He was better with bolts, belts, and broken things that admitted where they hurt. But Eli was watching from the bench, and Marcus knew. Some gifts were not money. Some gifts were doors built where walls had been. The first Saturday, only 6 students came. By the third, there were 17. They stood around an old engine Marcus had pulled from a junkyard truck, learning ratios from pulleys, circuits from battery terminals, patience from stuck bolts, and dignity from a man who never once told them they were lucky to be there. Eli wrote the first lesson on a small whiteboard. Check the small part first. Under it lay the spiral notebook, open now not as evidence, but as a beginning. Near the bottom of the first page, tucked where only Marcus and Eli could see it, was the old line Eli's mother had written years before, back when the notebook was new and grief had not yet entered their house. Let him learn in the way his hands understand. That evening, after the last student left, Eli stood in the quiet garage and asked, "Dad, do you think Mom saw the boardroom?" Marcus turned off the work light over the engine, leaving only the warm lamp above the desk. The garage became still, not frozen like the boardroom had been, but peaceful, the kind of silence that lets a heart finally set down what it carried. He put the red shop towel beside the notebook and rested one hand on his son's shoulder. "Your mom saw you before they did," he said. Outside, the school's apology sat folded in a drawer, the cleared record sat in a file, and the scholarship was back where it belonged, but the real miracle stayed under that small garage light. A father who never had to raise his voice to be strong, a boy who got his name back, and a truth that proved quiet dignity can wait longer than lies and still arrive with clean hands.